Born to Stand Out has 3 new fragrances that they just dropped, and I'm going to talk to you about them today in this video. If you don't know Born to Stand Out, please go catch videos that I've done on the channel for this house. There's 4 videos already on the house. You can watch them and discover all of their fragrances. Not all, we've talked about a lot of them, but not every single one, because this is a house that has a lot of fragrances. So if you're interested in discovering new niche houses, you can go to this house and this brand and look up their fragrances, because I'm sure you'll find something that will satisfy you. But today I'm talking about 3 fragrances from Born to Stand Out. Those are Angel's Powder, this one right here, created by Anne-Sophie Behaghel of Flair. She did one other fragrance for this house called Sugar Addict, which actually featured in Mystery Box number 2. We also have a fragrance called Drunk Maple, this one right here. This is created by Alex Lee. He's done 2 other fragrances for Born to Stand Out, and he's with men. And then finally Mary Jane, which I actually just featured in a Cannabis 420 fragrances video. Did you catch that video? Go find out more about this one in that video. And this is created by Camille Chemardin. So the fragrances are sold over at Ministry Scent here in San Francisco. If you're in the city, local or nearby, you're visiting, go check them out over there. You can smell them and see which ones you like. But today I'm talking about these 3 fragrances. If you want to find out about them, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sebastian. We're talking about Born to Stand Out. Let me know if you're a fan of this house. If you have a favorite fragrance from this house, please put a comment down below so I can find out. As I said, these 3 just launched. But you know what? The brand was at Essence early March, and I was there. And I kept going to the stand for Born to Stand Out. It was so packed. There were so many people there. I could not get through. This really, really hyped brand. The fragrances are very unique. They've got really great names, fun names, quirky names, catchy names, naughty names, and the fragrances don't disappoint. They're a little out there, a little unusual. Some are very wearable, but I like the fact that they're using different unusual notes in some of their fragrances, which makes them very kind of adventurous to wear, but also really fun to wear. So the first one we're going to talk about is Angel's Powder, created by Anne-Sophie Behaghel. This features notes of cotton candy, nail polish, white musks, raspberry, heliotrope, icing sugar, vanilla sugar, pink pepper extra pure, Guaiac wood. Very interesting notes, correct? Nail polish, have you seen that come up in fragrances before? But you know what? As a kid, when my mom did nail polish, I was always addicted to that smell. So it was very interesting to smell it. She'd do her nails and I'd just sit there and watch her do the nails, and then I can smell the fragrance. I always loved smelling nail polish. It had this very synthetic, weird, slightly fruity, kind of a colorful smell. And I think they've captured it here perfectly. So you've got this kind of a weird synthetic smell of nail polish mixed in with gourmand notes. For me, this is a very powdery fragrance, similar to a lot of other Born to Stand Out fragrances. I feel like the DNA of this house is powdery, and even though they've worked with several different firms, I believe the first batch of fragrances that they dropped when they first launched were Firmenich. Then they moved on to Flair, which Anne-Sophie Behaghel is with, Alex Lee of Man, and so, you know, but they're very cohesive fragrances. There's a certain DNA, very powdery fragrances, and it's definitely noticeable here. This does have a very musky edge about it, but it's sweet, sugary, very powdery, and I think it's created from the white musks that are in here, and also that heliotrope. It creates a very powdery edge, but sweet, fruity for sure, and that synthetic touch from the nail polish, it's pretty prominent. It's an unusual kind of a smell, but I guess, as I was saying, there was a fruity kind of smell sometimes with nail polish, but in a synthetic way, and it's captured here perfectly, and it kind of complements the raspberries fruitiness and any kind of fruitiness that the cotton candy might have. In the end, it starts getting you know, spicy and also woody when it's drying down, but it's a fun kind of a fragrance to wear. Very powdery, very sugary, sweet, gourmandesque, but also definitely capturing the fruitiness. It's an unusual fragrance in that I've never seen or rarely seen nail polish come up, but it's weird, and I'm not saying it's extremely weird, but there is a weirdness about it that's kind of addicting. It makes you want to keep wearing it, if that makes sense. So hopefully you guys will get to try Angel's Powder from the house of Born to Stand Out. Flair, the company Flair, with the perfumers Anne-Sophie Behaghel, Amélie Bourgeois, and a few other perfumers, has become one of my favorite firms for perfumers creating fragrances, and I always rush to check out the fragrances of these perfumers, and when they create fragrances for different houses, they definitely do not disappoint. And here we've got a really great release from this house. This is Angel's Powder from the house of Born to Stand Out. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and spritz it and then tell you a little bit more about this fragrance, and so that you'll get a little bit more of an idea. It's definitely very powdery, and I like the name Angel's Powder. It does have sometimes the reminder of mixing sugar and maybe a little bit of powdery flour to create some kind of a baking thing happening, you know? That's what I'm getting with the smell a little bit. But that there's that weird synthetic nail polishy smell mixed in with all the sugary sweetness and kind of candied kind of touches and fruity kind of touches. Very, very interesting. It's fruity, but then it's not. Then it's a bit fruity again, but very powdery for sure. Very, very interesting fragrance. I feel like Angel's Powder will also really work great with Sugar Addict, the previous fragrance that Anne-Sophie Behaghel did. If you want to intensify the sugariness, you can spritz that down, because the Sugar Addict is considered a fragrance sweetener from Born to Stand Out. So you can sweeten it up more, make it sugarier and sweeter, and intensify the experience as well. But either way, Angel's Powder is the first fragrance out of the three I'm speaking about today. All right, next up we're talking about Drunk Maple from perfumer Alex Lee. I believe this is the third fragrance he's created for Born to Stand Out. And this is a fragrance that's kind of familiar to me, and I'll tell you why. It has notes of soft suede, rum, maple syrup, coffee resinoid, Orcanox, Davana essential oil, benzoin resinoid, vanilla, pink pepper, and sandalwood. If you like the idea of maple and coffee together, definitely check this one out. The thing that I wanted to say about this one, it does remind me of Followed a little bit from the house of Kerosene. So Kerosene did Followed, and there's the whole controversy, if that's the right word to use, with the fact that that fragrance is overwhelmingly intense. It's a room filler. It stays in a room a long time and doesn't disappear, but some people say it's not that. The fragrance, that's how I experienced the fragrance. So maybe it's a chemistry thing. Some people experience it less. But if you are one of the people that consider that fragrance to be way too strong to wear, this is a great alternative for that, I think. So the differences are, this one has that leatheriness that Followed doesn't have, but it's an interesting contrast to the whole maple syrup coffee. It's almost like breakfast with leather attire. Just imagine going for breakfast. Maybe you ride a motorcycle and you're dressed in leather. The leather smell is there. It's quite strong. Mixed in with that kind of breakfasty maple syrup. Maybe you're having pancakes, drinking some coffee and things like that. It's here. But you know, I also get a bit of greenness and kind of a spicy aromatic touch that's contrasted through the fragrance, cutting through the maple syrup, the coffee, and the rum, because I don't want to forget the rum, because this is also quite boozy. But cutting through all of those, creating this kind of a green contrast. Perhaps it's from the Davana essential oil, because I can't see anything else that could give us a greenish aromatic spicy vibe. But it's here, it's in there, and it definitely is noticeable when you're wearing it. But for sure it's leathery. As I said, it's a standout note. It's a soft leather, but a bit smoky. Not necessarily like very noticeable. There's a slight harshness about it, but when you're mixing it with the gourmand notes of the maple syrup and the coffee and the rum, it definitely kind of smooths it out. But when you focus on it, you'll really notice. But also there's the Orcanox in here, and if you don't know what Orcanox is, it's Alex Lee works for a firm called Man, and it's their version of a synthetic alternative to Ambergris, because you know Ambergris is so expensive, and a lot of these firms like Firmenich, Man and Gévaudan and IFF, all these places have their own versions of Ambergris. So there is that here in here as well. When it's drying down, you'll notice it. It's a kind of a musky take on that kind of a note. To me, it doesn't smell like Ambergris, but it's there. It's ambery. It's a bit woody and dry and dusty. And again, This fragrance is also on the powdery edge, and once again, definitely there's a cohesion about it. It really does match the fragrances of this house. They're consistent and not completely standing out. Even though they're made by different perfumers, the brand knows how to capture the DNA of this house, and they do a great job with it. Again, going back to the alternative for Followed, again, if you are a fan of that smell, but you think it's overwhelming, because a lot of people think it's just overwhelming, like me, because if you get it on your clothes, it's not going to come off for a long time. This is not as beast mode, as potent as that, but to me, it has similarities to the smell of Followed by Kerosene. It's maple syrup and coffee in the end, and that's kind of what the Followed fragrance was all about. So let's go ahead and quickly smell this and give you a little bit more idea about it. So there is a smokiness, and I think it's coming from the leather for sure. But it does get sweet when it's drying down. But the leather also, the soft suede note does, evolve to become a lot more intense. But up top, it's boozy and for sure maple syrupy and coffee. Coffee is definitely present here. Again, it's like breakfast. It's like you're having breakfast. But you'll experience that kind of green, spicy, aromatic touch of the Davana in here. But it's a really great fragrance. I think for me, my favorite, well, I think my favorites are a tie between Drunk Maple and Mary Jane. But I think out of the three, I'm preferring Drunk Maple, because for me, I'm always afraid to get followed on me at all because it doesn't wash off. This one, it's not as potent, so it's an enjoyable wearing experience either way. So this is Drunk Maple from the house of Born to Stand Out. Hopefully you guys get to try it, especially if you like gourmands with a little bit of leather and, you know, amber and things like that thrown in. And last but not least, we're talking about Mary Jane. This is it right here. So I featured Mary Jane in a cannabis fragrances video recently. If you haven't caught that video and you like the note of cannabis, go catch it to find out more about it. This is created by Camille Chemardin. She created a fragrance for Lumari called Porthole. I know you guys are fans of that fragrance. We featured it in Scent Club last summer. It sold out everywhere. They were out of stock for many months. So this is the same perfumer. And once again, she's using fruits, but this time against cannabis. So fruits against cannabis. For me, the more I wear this, the first time I wore it, and the second time I wore it, and the third time I wore it, I was like getting more cannabis. But the more I get used to it, there's an addicting fruitiness about it, and now fruits are more prominent than the actual greenness of the cannabis. But this features notes of rhubarb, cannabis, hemp essence, frozen mint, elemi essence, cashmere wood, grapefruit, passion fruit, sage essence, electric woods, pine essence, and caramel. First off, it's not very caramelly. That caramel is there to give you a slight sweetness. For me, this is very rhubarb forward, and I feel like the rhubarb started appearing a lot more on multiple wearings versus first few wearings. The rhubarb is very pulpy and does remind me a little bit of rhubarb écarlate from Hermès, but not as fruity as that fragrance, the experience, because there's a pulpy, juicy texture about the fragrance, and I like that against the cannabis because it does tone it down. But for me, it's cannabis plus hemp essence to give you an overdose of this kind of cannabis greenness. But they have that mint. You'll notice it. It's a frozen mint, they call it. So there's a bit of a cooling effect happening. Not quite, a little bit maybe. And for me, this passion fruit comes in as well. But if you caught that video on the cannabis fragrances, I mentioned, I think a great note against cannabis or cannabis notes is grapefruit. You'll notice the grapefruit in here as well. It does add a little zing, spice, and bitterness to the fragrance. But it's like this pulpy fruits, almost like Jell-O, because that's how I experience it. There's the pulp, the kind of like Jell-O, the jellied like pulp of the rhubarb is here, contrasted nicely with the greenness, the kind of herbal bitterness of the cannabis with this kind of fruitiness of the rhubarb. And it's not the kind of fruit that's uber fruity, because there is a slight vegetal touch about rhubarb as well, because it's almost like a fruit and vegetable combined together. If you've ever had rhubarb pie, you kind of get an idea. or smell the stuff. So it's that kind of a fragrance here. It's a very unique and very wearable cannabis fragrance. So it's a really nicely made fragrance. And those of you that are turned off by cannabis, I think you'll be satisfied with this because the fruitiness, the enough fruity pulpiness in here does, make it a lot more inviting than wearing just cannabis, which is kind of green, bitter, smoky, greasy, kind of oily, kind of a note. So I think she did, Camille Chemardin did a great job with this one. You might see a little bit of the touches of Porthole, because Porthole is also fruity, but it's salty. It's a pineapple, but there's that kind of creamy pulpiness in that fragrance as well. You'll kind of see it in here. But just be warned, it's cannabis, and a lot of people are challenged with cannabis. But I feel like this is very wearable cannabis fragrance, and I like that whole pulpy fruitiness contrasted against the cannabis and the hemp note that's in here. So that's Mary Jane. Let's go ahead and quickly smell it. If you've gotten your nose on these 3 fragrances, please do let me know what you think about them. And if you're nearby, local, or visiting, definitely go check out the fragrances over at Ministry of Scent on Valencia Street. So for sure, it's that pulp. It's not as pulpy on the strip. It's more pulpy on skin because I feel like I bring out the fruits. But again, also on first few wearings, it wasn't as fruity, but for some reason it started opening up more on me, and I got more fruits. But definitely you'll experience the minty, green, herbal, bitter, aromatic touches of the cannabis here. And contrasted nicely with the fruitiness. And, it has the herbal qualities, balsamic touches, and for sure it's musky as well. We've got some muskiness from that cashmere wood in here. I think it's a great fragrance. Both of these 2 are my favorites. So I can't decide which one I like more, Drunk Maple or Mary Jane, between these 3 fragrances. But I like them both because they're different, completely different from one another, but definitely enjoyable when you're wearing them. I think maybe the Drunk Maple gets a little too leathery, so it kind of goes away from reminding you of Follow, because Follow doesn't have that leathery touch. So maybe I might prefer the Mary Jane, but it's a toss-up between the 2. But anyway, those are my thoughts on these 3 fragrances from Born to Stand Out: Angel's Powder, Drunk Maple, and Mary Jane. Let me know if you've gotten your nose on these fragrances, and if you have a favorite Born to Stand Out fragrance, please let me know what it is. Put a comment down below so I can find out. And again, as I said, if you're nearby, local, visiting San Francisco, go to the Mission District off of Valencia Street and visit Ministry of Scent and check out all of the Born to Stand Out fragrances. Either way, guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.